Robert, nice to meet you. My name is Matt Hatch, and I run a live call and talk show all about the Wheel of Time, and I'm excited to chat with
Amazing.
you.
Pleasure to meet you, Matt. Thanks for having a chat.
Absolutely. I've read that you've always been drawn to creatures and villains, and so I got to know, like, what is it about creatures and villains that are so compelling for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if I'm drawn to them or they're drawn to me, but I have certainly ended up playing all sorts of interesting creatures and characters over the last decade or so.
Yeah.
I think I always had the acting bug from when I was little, and like most of us, I love playing dress up and imaginary things. But I was particularly drawn to kind of fantasy worlds and anything to do with magic and things like that. So I suppose my career has become the adult version of that. Really, it's like the ultimate dress up, being able to put on a
Yeah, yeah.
makeup like this one. Um, I love the challenge of it, particularly the kind of it's a real endurance marathon to do a day of prosthetics and. Something about that, I think I enjoy the like extremes of pushing me to the edge whilst also coming up with a character and a performance.
Is there, can you think back? Is there like because it sounds like you got that bug for fantasy pretty early on, is there like a moment? Was there a inciting event? You know what I mean? Like, can you think back about like that? Like, what was was it a movie? Was it a book? Was it something where you're just like, this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
this is it for me?
I'd love to say it was like when I got lost in the woods and was set on a quest or something. I'm sure that I think it must have been it would have been a book or books. I was very into reading. There's this book that sprung to mind called Ellis and the Hummock, and I just remember reading that really young and just being completely obsessed with it. But
Yeah.
I mean, I read The Hobbit quite young, and I loved that world. And it just kind of when I discovered that that was just the beginning of a whole world of one avenue, I think it kind of opened my eyes to like, oh wow, like this kind of imagination, an imaginary world is unlimited. There's so much out there, so
I
much
mean,
I haven't even begun to discover. I'm sure.
you brought up the Hobbit, right? And obviously, I know we're talking about the Wheel of Time, but I haven't. Obviously, you do work on Rings of Power. What is that like to, for you to, love something that early on, kind of, and then be part of that world?
Yeah, it, it's hard to kind of grasp really. Every now and then you just get this sudden moment where I just kind of think like, what would I tell little 10-year-old me? Because the big one really was when I was 10 with Star Wars. I was just completely and utterly obsessed there with Star Wars. So to have ended up doing all the Star Wars stuff I've done as well, like if you could tell little 10-year-old me. But we all carry a version of us, that self, with us, and you just have to kind of, rather than thinking of it as going back and telling them, I can tell them right now and just kind of
Yeah, yeah.
soak it all in because it's a real privilege.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to you talk about Rings of Power, and you sound very familiar, like the love and respect for Tolkien's worlds. Like, what was your familiarity with the Wheel of Time, like before were
Yeah.
chosen for this role?
Well, I'm ashamed to say I hadn't read Wheel of Time at all before I got this role,
Okay.
but I can only be grateful for the fact that it's been brought to my attention. I'd watched when I got the audition when I auditioned for this role. I had watched season 1 and 2,
Yeah.
um, and I loved it. It was this beautiful fantasy TV, so I loved it. And then the audition came in, and it was all code name, so it didn't say what it was. I immediately suspected what it might be, but at that point, I didn't know anything about the Eelfinn. I'd never heard of them.
Yeah.
Then when I got the role, I did a deep dive. So I tried my best. I started reading, and I tried to just read it naturally and get to the point organically, but it was
Yeah.
it was not much time to read 14 books worth of material. So I had to jump ahead and read the relevant sections with the Eelfinn.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I did because I'm working my way through the series now, and I pause when the TV shows come on so I don't confuse myself. But yeah, I've been my eyes have been opened to a whole new world.
Yeah. What was it like? As you're reading, was there something you found just like, oh yeah, this is cool, this is interesting? What was compelling about this character for you?
For the Eelfinn,
Yeah.
um, I mean they're just what I think is most compelling in a nutshell is the way he tells you so much detail but really tells you nothing at all. Like that's what I loved, and I think that's like a sign of such brilliant storytelling that makes the book so good in so many other ways. But you get the sense that these are real things that really exist, and they have these they have this detail and this lore of their own, and the way that they speak and what they're actually doing. And obviously, there's the whole world of the Eelfinn and the Aelfinn as well.
Yep. Yep.
But at the same time, you actually read the chapter and you end up with 20 more questions than you started with. How does this work? And he, doesn't, that's it. And it's kind of just like, well, fill it in for yourself, which is, again, where people's imagination comes in and why people love reading these things so much. What's great about this show is then Rafe and all the creatives and the makeup team and costume and myself get to fill in some of those gaps ourselves and
Yep.
hopefully do it justice.
Yeah, no, I mean, have you ever asked yourself, like, I've been speaking of the Aelfinn and Eelfinn, have you ever said to yourself, like, if I had like three questions about my future, for example, that I could be answered truthfully, what would you ask?
That is such a good question, and I can't believe I hadn't thought of that before. I I'm always a little wary, I have to admit. The thing of in fantasy where people get to find out about their future, just like Matt in the show is extremely cautious. He says
Yep.
to Mitt, "I don't want to know. I don't want to know." I'm a bit like that. Um, I guess it would be fun to just have glimpses rather than like glimpses of Matt hanging. If have glimpses of like creatures. This is like a glimpse of a creature that you're going to be someday, and then be just kind of like, huh, how do I get to that?
I
That
love
would be
that. Oh
quite
my
fun to know.
gosh. Yes, just you, you 10-year-old you seeing your future and going like,
Yeah,
how does
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
ever happen?
There you go. That brings it back full circle. Yeah, you're kind of like,
I love that.
huh. But then the danger is you end up just trying to spend your whole life getting there. So that's what I'd get wary of.
Yeah, if
Um,
would you ever want to wish for something if you knew somebody else got to set a price for you? Like, would you ever gamble on that?
yeah, I mean, obviously the sensible, grounded part of me says no, of course not. But obviously the temptation would be there. I guess what's wonderful and brilliant for the audience watching this scene and reading the chapters is that we know there's a price, but in the moment, Matt or whoever doesn't
Right,
necessarily.
right.
So that's what's kind of exciting, and Matt kind of stumbles his way through it. Luckily, obviously, brilliantly, but yeah, I suppose if you didn't know, then then it could turn out badly, couldn't it? But I'm sure there's some things I could wish for. The opportunity arose.
I think for Matt saying luckily and brilliantly, those things like come together well, really well
Right, right,
for,
right. That
for
seems
his
to kind
character.
of be quite fitting, doesn't it?
I know I'm kind of running down on time here, so I like to do some quick fire questions for you. Like, how about snakes or foxes?
Boxes.
Okay. Um,
Although I have to just caveat that one. I am Chinese Year of the Snake as well. So
okay. Okay. I mean, it it,
because
it tec technically fits, right? Related,
yeah,
related.
yeah, yeah.
If you had to choose one of these four things, fire, music, iron, or none of the above, what would you choose?
None of the above.
Okay. Good. How would you rate your skill at bargaining?
Um, yeah, good, good. I feel like I can hold my own in the market.
Okay. Okay.
She says, maybe not. Maybe I'm too British about it. I'd end up being too polite and end up with less than I started with.
Okay, and this one it may come out of left field, but would you rather visit a parallel world or a perpendicular world?
Perpendicular.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I like it. Hey, by the way, it's a lot of fun to meet and chat. Like this is one of those I'd love to dig into. All the creatures and characters you've done. It's a blast. You get to play in a fantasy world that I've loved to be like thinking of and playing in myself for a long time. So thank you very much for taking some time to chat.
Thank you. Honestly, it means the world that it means a lot to people like yourself who have had this in their lives for so long. So thank you so much.
Absolutely, it was great. Great to meet you.